They say sports brings people together, but what happens when the game you love becomes the thing that breaks you? When the laughter in the dressing room stops feeling safe? When silence becomes survival? And when speaking up means losing everything you worked for? What kind of courage does that take? The truth will set you free, but no one tells you how much it will cost. Welcome to the DemocraTEA podcast, where we spill the tea on people, power and politics. My name is Anum. At 28, I became one of the youngest members of Parliament elected to Westminster. From the Houses of Parliament to protests on the streets, I've seen up close how power works and how often it doesn't. That's why I started this podcast. It's unfiltered, unapologetic and disruptive. We go behind the headlines and behind the sound bites to challenge the status quo. Now, I'm not a journalist and this isn't another political podcast. This is about the conversations that impact all of us. The conversations that don't always make the headlines, but shape how we live, work and show up in the world. I will talk about politics, but also look at power, identity, faith, equality and everything in between. Real people, real stories, real talk. Today I'm joined by Azeem Rafiq. Azeem is a former English cricketer who played professionally in England for Yorkshire County Cricket Club. He captained the England under-15s and under-19 sides and in 2012 became the youngest man to captain a Yorkshire side as well as the first person of Asian origin to do so. Together we unpack why racism isn't banter and why as a community we need to talk more about men's mental health. After you've listened, I'd love to know what you think. Do we have enough representation in sports and are we talking about men's mental health enough? And before we dive in, I know I say this in every episode, but thank you so much. I cannot articulate how much your support means to me. It would really help the algorithm if you interact with this podcast wherever you listen. So please do leave a comment, share with a friend and hit subscribe so we can keep inviting guests to spill the tea on people, power and politics. Azeem, thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive in, what are you drinking today?
Cappuccino, nice and boring.
Is that to give you an energy boost?
You know what? I've never been a tea drinker, coffee drinker at all until a couple of years ago when I went on a massive diet. And it was basically this and sparkling water that got me going. And then since then, I'm just addicted to it. I can't go, I literally wake up first thing, I need it.
Oh, really? What about Garak chai?
No, I mean, I've had it, but no, it doesn't really do it for me. I can't, it's just too sugary. Can't do it.
Oh, really?
Oh, you know what? I can have it when I'm in Pakistan. When it's the real one, I can have it. But when it's a mixture with a powder,
No, that's funny. Now, Azeem, you were born in Pakistan and then you moved over to England at a relatively young age. What was that like, uprooting your life, essentially?
I think you look, at the time, you don't really realise it. But when you look back now, at the age of 10, you've grown up in a place, you're used to the surroundings, you're starting to, grow around your friends, family, you're in your safe place. And then all of a sudden, my dad's business partner got kidnapped and burnt. So for us, it was a forced move. And, I think when you're young, you just throw yourself into whatever sort of comes. And that's what we did when we first moved over. But yeah, it was a huge challenge to go from Karachi to Barnsley.
Wow.
It was very, very different. But like I said, I think when you're young, you just sort of throw yourself into it. But as as we will unpack a little bit now, as you get older, the effects of it do dictate, the way you look at the world and the way you look at your life moving forward.
And how young were you when you moved over?
Yeah, 10 years old. So,
Okay,
July 2001. And, obviously 2001, significant, just before 9/11. Moved over. And it wasn't planned. We actually went to Saudi Arabia. We went to a pilgrimage. Then we stopped off in London. My dad's brothers were there, and then we were going to head to Canada, like the other couple of business partners. But yeah, we ended up staying, and like I said, it was a big learning curve. I remember it Halloween night, 2001 is when we first moved to Barnsley, and it was like, where is everyone? There's no one here. No one lives here. Very different to the city that never sleeps, Karachi.
And so your love of cricket, did that stem from your childhood in Pakistan, or is that something that you found in Yorkshire?
Oh no, definitely from the minute I could remember walking really. I think, look, especially back then, it's a bit different now. Cricket was part of everyone's life. It was just the given thing to do, really. And I was no different. And I used to come home from school and sit with my granddad. And on PTV, there used to be a highlight match, half an hour every day. So that's how I sort of got into it. And then as soon as the sun sort of went down a little bit, I would be out on the streets just playing. And my mum would be running around looking for me to come back for my tuition, for my Quran lessons. And I'd be gone and I'd come back in the night full of blood, dust, you name it. 'Cause
What kind of cricket were you
well,
playing?
it's on the streets. And, I love diving around. It's not quite like diving on grass. But yeah, I just absolutely loved it from as far back as I can remember. And, even when we moved to Barnsley, that first winter, one of the first things I looked for was a cricket club to get involved with.
And so then when you were playing cricket, when was the moment you realised that actually this is something that I really enjoy, really love, and I'm quite passionate about?
Yeah, like I said, I think for me, from when I was in Pakistan, I loved the game. I adored it. I played it. I enjoyed it. In terms of doing it as a professional or anything like that, that never really was in the head because you didn't really know. I've grown up playing on the street, so for me it was like, right, from 4 o'clock to 7, 8 o'clock, I play cricket, and that's it. Didn't really understand much more than that. It was when and also didn't play like hardball cricket, so it was a lot of table cricket. It was just before we left Karachi that I'd started playing hardball cricket, and actually I'd been to London a couple of times, to stay with my dad's brothers, and I played a little bit of like wind ball cricket. So yeah, when I actually moved to Barnsley, that's when I started playing hardball cricket. But even then, I've gone from playing cricket every day to once a week in an indoor thing, or in the winter, 2 months where there's no cricket. So for me, any chances to play cricket was just, another day I could play cricket. It wasn't anything like, oh, I want to progress, I want to do this, I want to do that. That came a lot later when I actually understood what it actually meant. So yeah, look, fell in love with it from, as far back as I can remember.
So it really was just a case of this was something that you were really enjoying. And then at what age did you turn around and think, actually, this is something that I want to take more seriously and do it professionally?
Yeah, again, look, when I first went to Yorkshire trials at the age of under 12s, I didn't know what I was going to trials. Like, someone's at the club said, "Oh, there's these trials happening. Do you want to go to it?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll go." For me, it was another day I got to play cricket. And then I went through a series of trials, and then I got to these final trials. And that was the first time my parents sort of came to the game. And then, yeah, I got selected. Even at that stage, didn't really know. Then I got picked for, then I went through the age groups. I got to captain England under 15s. And then I made my Yorkshire second 11 debut around when I was 14, 15, I think, around the same. I can't remember exactly. And then you start sort of being in the dressing room with professionals, like people you've watched on TV, basically. And that's when you start to understand it. Don't forget, I'm still a kid. I'm a baby at this stage. And all I see is just, I want to play cricket. I want to play cricket. And I think them conversations then start going on to what professionally playing looks like. And I think it all just happens very organically, and didn't really think up much of it. It was when, I guess, I signed my first professional contract that I was like, oh, right, so I get paid to play now. And that was probably when it first sort of hit me what I wanted to do with the game. And then from there on, for me, I just had one dream: to be the best in the world. I wanted to, put all my efforts into, playing for England. And, fulfilling not just my dream but my parents' dream, and I think that's something obviously a lot of South Asians are sort of we're brought up in that way. We family and culture that means a lot to us, and I'm eldest son, so I saw that responsibility, and yeah, that's what my passion, my obsession, my drive ended up becoming, is just running through a brick wall to be the best I can be and play for England.
But if you cast your mind back to being a child, being in that dressing room with people that you've seen on TV, see people that you admire, how did that feel?
Yeah, it's surreal. Because like I said, in 2005 Ashes, I was 15. So to watch that, and I think that gripped the nation, that gripped everyone. It was a massive moment in English cricket. So to then sharing a dressing room with some of them people who, up until sort of actually spending some time with them, were my heroes. Obviously that changes, and you know what they say, never meet your heroes. That was definitely the case, but I think going in there initially, sort of, you're more or less blinkered, and you're just like, wow, this is unbelievable. And yeah, for me, I was just so driven to just concentrate on the cricket in a way. I don't think, although it was surreal at the start, I don't think I really sort of paid too much attention to it at the start, but obviously over time, that changed a lot.
I mean, like you say, you just wanted to play cricket.
Simple, really. That's it. And I still love the game. Obviously, the love's been, scarred quite a lot, and there's a lot of times I question that love now. It's like being in a really one-sided relationship, and I do question that many times now. But yeah, that's what I guess has happened through experiences of being involved, and the racism that I experienced.
Yeah, and I know your story well, Azeem. I remember seeing it on television, but also I remember when you were in front of the DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee in the House of Commons. There'd been a lot of media outrage, a lot of media conversation around what you'd experienced. You went in front of this House of Commons Select Committee, spoke about your experiences, and I remember watching this and thinking, oh my goodness, like this guy. I mean, look, you're in cricket, I was in politics, but I don't think our experiences are going to be too dissimilar. Not exactly the same. You've experienced very different things, and I've experienced different things. But at the heart of it, that kind of feeling of being othered is something that really resonated with me. And I think it resonates with so many other people. And not to bring up what you've been through, but I think for some people who maybe haven't read your book or maybe don't know your story, what was it that you experienced that was so bad?
Yeah, well, I'll share a little bit, but I'd love you to go and read the book.
I read the book. I thought it was
No, I know
brilliant.
you, but I'm on about the listeners. Listen, I think the first bit that you talk about in terms of shared experience and that resonation, my experience is not unique in any way, shape, or form, especially not in sport, especially not in cricket, and across our society. The only unique thing is about it is the way I guess I spoke up and then was listened to for a little bit. In terms of what I went through, so I've talked about entering that dressing room. I entered that dressing room as a 14-year-old, um, and with just one dream, one vision, one passion. And like I said, at first you're like, wow, I watch these guys on TV, and then very, very, as I look back, um, you know, being called a P word, being told to Asian players being told to go and sit separately near the toilets, a lot of overt racist comments, but a lot of covert stuff as well. But I was so blinkered that for a very, very long time, and I think again, this is the resonation. This is the bit where a lot of us have same experiences. You don't actually want to believe, and you don't actually want to see that you're being treated differently because of your race or religion. It's actually, we get, and I had it like we all do the minute we say something, is like, oh, you're using the race card. Actually, it's the last thing we want to accept, and believe that we're being treated differently, because the way you look at the world just changes. I mean, like for a very, very long time for me, I didn't want to see it for what it was. In 2013, I was struggling that much. In 2012, as you said, I became the youngest Yorkshire captain. I captained a team full of international stars, some of the best players in the world, and some that have gone on to become some of the greatest players. I captained that team. I got picked for England Lions, which is just below the England team. And I was not far away from, I was involved around the test match in India. I had everything to be absolutely chuffed about. But end of that year, we all went out, and I remember crying my eyes out to my teammate. And at the time, I didn't know why. Because if you look at everything I've worked towards and everything I'm sort of getting there with at a very young age, there was no reason for me to be upset. But there was something that was really, really getting to me. And I really struggled with my mental health. In 2013, only 6 months after, being in such a high place, I was on the other side of my balcony. I nearly committed suicide. And that is what those experiences and those constant reminders of you don't belong were doing to me. But actually, I didn't want to see it. Because I didn't want to confront it. And I think that's something we all go through. We want to work with the system. We want to work, we want to achieve our dreams. We want to be more than just, a brown person. So you sort of, try and see the good in people. Listen, I really struggled, but I didn't know why I was struggling. And it wasn't till 2017 when I actually saw it for what it was. And reported it for the first time. I mean, I don't know when the podcast is going to come out, and you might edit this bit out, but we are coming up to next week is going to be 4 years from the select committee. We are nearly 8 years from when I first reported it internally. We are over 5 years from when I first spoke out publicly. And I sort of look back at them moments, and you talk about the select committee, which was a bit, I think now when I look back, it was huge. But the one thing that shocked me the next day was there were so many white people that were shocked about my experiences, but so many people of color just going, also shocked. This is what we live with every day.
This is our reality.
This is our lived, when they talk about lived experience, and it's really nice as a quote, but they don't want to hear your lived experience, really. And yeah, I think that's the sort of, they were the sort of experiences. And, like I said, have a read of the book. And what you'll get in the book is, I forgot how many pages it is. It's actually not that long a read. But what it was like to live in my shoes, to be that boy that, had a dream, a passion, a lot of adversity. I'm a baby at 34 years old. I really go into my personal life. I talk about mental health, share the challenges of speaking out, and actually why, in my opinion, and I'm not as experienced as you, and a lot of the other people in our community who have gone on in politics and sort of societal level, but what you get from my perspective is a very unfiltered, straight up, and the BS that goes on around this space, which is, I guess, the thing that even sat here today, as we go through the conversation, what really is disappointing is that we do, a lot changes, but a lot doesn't change.
Yeah.
Which is very, very frustrating.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's one of the conversations that you and I have
every time
we see each other, is actually just how challenging things are. And it feels like progress is being made, but sometimes it feels like it's one step forward, two steps back. It sometimes feels like you say, lived experiences is like a lovely buzzword that people like to use, or politicians or those in power or with authority like to use. But then driving that meaningful change doesn't come about, or it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like there's always a few crumbs in a few direction. And, again, there's a chapter about an uncomfortable conversation back to our community. Sadly, those that represented us in rooms of power have not really, in my opinion, represented us.
Yes. Sorry to cut you through.
No, go for
it. I completely agree with this. And I think as I read your book, which was a couple of months ago now, but as I read through your book, as I say, I resonated with so much of it. And there is a particular chapter in your book where you talk about politics and representation and how actually, yeah, exactly. So again, sorry to cut you off, but those people who are in power might look like you or might be from those same communities, but they don't necessarily drive for meaningful change on your behalf. And this is something that I've got into shit for whilst I've been in politics, and it's a difficult conversation to have. But ethnic minorities are not a homogenous voting bloc. We're just not a bloc at all. We're not a monolith. Whether you're Pakistani, Indian, Sri Lankan, Bangladeshi, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, you can be middle class, you can be working class, you can be super rich. We're not all the same.
No, and you know what? I look at a lot of this space now and how we've gone from Black Lives Matter as a country, we're going to be better, to, and there's always some sort of a, coming back to its old self, to where we are today, where, especially, and I'll straight, towards Muslims, the Islamophobia. I mean, it's not just that it's been okay. That line has been pushed, and it's not happened by chance. It's happened by design, to the point where you are all the red carpet now if you attack Muslims. I've read some stuff today about that you can criticize Islam, etc., etc. I'm looking at it going, hold on a minute. That's all you do every day anyway. That's what happens. In terms of going back to our own community, there's different layers to it. There absolutely is different layers to it. But I just feel, I see everyone has a different experience. Completely respect that. Everyone has a different outlook on life. That's fine. What I find really frustrating is what I see is a lot of people actually use the community and the community's experiences and the community's feelings and emotions to get themselves in the room, get themselves elected. If I'm talking about politicians, get themselves on boards. If I'm talking about administrators, you name it. So actually, you're pushing yourself forward as someone that's representing the community. And then you get in that room and then you just look after yourself. And, the reality is if we keep talking around the edges of this, trying to not upset people, then we're never going to solve this. Arguably, the diversity, the whole diversity thing over the last few years, it was never set up to succeed. But also, if you look at representation, has actually been used, and it's actually been used to oppress those that you support, those communities. I'll give you an example, clear one. Under the Conservatives, we are the most represented government we probably had, and the damage done to people of color through them guys were the most. I mean, the line was pushed through them. But it doesn't matter where I look, and that's the sad part of, or the disappointing and the frustrating part. If you sit where I sit, is that you feel like, okay, they're bad, that's bad. Then you look there and you're like, oh my God, that's bad. And you look there and you go, where's the hope? And that's the frustrating part, because you hope and you vote for someone, or you champion for someone thinking that they're going to help. And that was the same in cricket. Even after I got heard as such, actually, I mean, I'll go back a little bit. The person that actually should have had my back was the Inclusivity and Diversity Board member at Yorkshire County Cricket Club, Hanif Malik. He was the one that I went to, and he was the one that I realised later on, the minute I walked out of his house, had actually stabbed me in the back. So I talk about, and then when I spoke out, there was open letters, left, right, centres from businesses, etc. And then actually, I know that through the executives at Yorkshire, some of them went round to make sure that I didn't get support. So, and that was my frustration at the time, and even to this day, that's my frustration, because what's the easiest thing for the system to do? I'll get a brown person in here, I'll get a black person in here, and then look at us, we can't be racist. And that's my point about how representation's been, used to actually, keep the racism, institutional racism going. And I firmly believe this: institutional racism, the best partner for institutional racism are people of color.
Institutional racism is such an issue right now, and it's really difficult to prove as well, I find. And I think if I think back to my own experiences and your own experiences, there's two different types of racism. You get the overt P word, you're a terrorist, you're this, you're that. And then you get the other side, which is really difficult to prove, or it's really difficult to call it out as Islamophobia or racism. And then actually also I find there's this like kind of middle ground where there's people that are expected to support you, but actually they don't also want to get involved. And you talk about this quite a bit in your book, how there's people around you that you expected to have your back, but they didn't necessarily. And that's an experience that I and so many other people will understand. I've never spoken about this publicly, but when I was elected, I don't know if you know how this works in Parliament. It's actually a bit crazy when you think about how archaic and how traditional Westminster is. But every single day starts with prayers. So you have prayers before like PMQs or any question time, and you need to be in for your prayers to like reserve your slot in the chamber. So you've got the iconic green benches. You need to reserve your spot and you need to be there for prayers to have that spot for the day. So for example, on a Wednesday when it's like PMQs, you want to be there. You want to have that good seat. And I'm a practicing Muslim. My faith is really important to me. And when they were doing prayers, I would politely sit down. I wouldn't go on my phone because I thought I wouldn't like someone to do that to me, and I think that's disrespectful if they're doing their prayers. So I wouldn't go on my phone. I would just sit quietly, and to be honest, in my brain, I just read the Rood Sharif over and over again. So I was doing my own prayers. And one day, someone, and I'm not going to name any names, one day someone came up to me and said, oh, one of your colleagues, so another fellow SNP MP, was behind you in one of the prayers, and they turned round and I overheard them saying to someone, oh, it's really disrespectful that Anum sits down when we're doing our prayers. And I remember taking a step back and thinking, I don't understand how this is disrespectful, because you've got other Caucasian MPs who don't follow any faith or are atheist or whatever, and they also sit down at prayers. But why do you have an issue when the only Muslim in the group is the one that sits down? And I still think about this experience till this day. And I took a step back and I think, do I say anything to the leader? Do I say anything to the whip's office? Do I complain about this? And ultimately, and maybe I'm part of the problem here, but I took a step back and decided not to say anything because I just thought, what's going to happen? What's the point? What's going to change?
And that's, I mean, I'll try and go back to how you started, and in terms of, that fear of getting involved, that fear of the repercussion, and also the system. In most people's eyes, the system will always win, right? I completely understand the group that's really fearful, because my word, it is difficult. You put your head above the parapet, they come for you. I felt every force of that from every angle, even after being vindicated over and over again. To this day, all the racists are supported in cricket, and I'm ostracized. So I know exactly how difficult it is. So I don't have a problem with the group that's fearful of consequences and just wants to, obviously I'd love them to not be a bystander. I'd love them to, right? And, there's many quotes about it's not you don't remember those that actually, you remember the silence of others, right? But I understand how difficult it is. What I have a real problem with is those that pretend to actually, yeah, you're right, but then basically sit on just enough of a side and then go, you know what, now is my time to make this work for me. And those are the people I have a problem with, a real problem with. And, this is something like, from my point of view, I've been pretty silent about a lot of this over the last few years while being covertly attacked, but no more moving forward. And it's the people that use and have used my pain and many other people's pain to then go and support the system to oppress everyone else. I don't have ultimately change happens through many, many little things, right? So being in the room and all of that does help for some people, etc. But the fact that you've used your color of your skin to then make the environment oppress our own further, that I have a real problem with. And, I say to them people very, very clearly, you're setting an environment, you got a little job, well done. You got little crumbs, enjoy it. But actually what you're doing is letting the institution racially abuse your child tomorrow. And when that happens, because it's not an if, it really isn't an if. When that happens is the day you're going to turn around and you're going to wish you didn't do that to me. And that's how so there are different layers of it. In terms of what you talk about, the reality is if you'd have gone and shared that experience, be like, oh, you're thinking too much. Oh, it wasn't like that. I didn't mean it like that.
Gaslight you into thinking.
And they gaslight you. And I've had that, bearing in mind, publicly was August 2020. Select committee was November 21. In that period, I had every angle of all of what a whistleblower goes through, to attacking you, to discrediting you, to ignoring you, to gaslighting you, to death threats, you name it, I had it. No one believed me. That's the reality. And, there's people in parliament that, later on were suddenly my champions that I got in touch with very, very early on. They didn't believe me. I was proven right over and over again through several processes. But I sit here today and that gaslighting for the last, 18 months has been a really difficult time for me. My dad had ill health. He was very ill. We had to move countries because, deja vu, 21 years on from my dad moving us for safety reasons. I had to move all of us because my house was attacked, broad daylight. My businesses was attacked. I was getting death threats. The police would not help. So we had to do that. And that it was really tough. And dad's health deteriorated. At times we were in hospital 3-4 times a week in a different country, away from his doctors at this age. And it's been really difficult. And then I lost my dad recently. And I found it so difficult that and it's the same actually, if I pick it back to when I lost my son and then the way they treated me around the loss of my son to now and the way the way they've done this covertly over the last 18 months. When I tell someone, they think I'm going mad. And that's what you would have had. It's me. And even some of my staunchest supporters have left me very, very isolated and very on my own. Bearing in mind, to this day, I've been proven practically right on everything I said. And they've gone for me very covertly. So when I'm now telling people, again, I'm not being believed. And there's, it's not like that. It's not like that. And there's this thing of, just let it go. Just let it go. And you know what, Anum? I did let it go. I moved countries. I stopped responding. I was attacked, mainstream press, every freaking day. My house was attacked. I didn't share, even this book, I've not shared half as much as what actually took place because I wanted to see the good in people. But they've kept coming for me. And they came for me around, first week of Ramadan, they came for me. 7th anniversary of my son's death, they attacked me again. Around my dad's death, they attacked me again. And you just sit there going, actually, I'm ignoring it. I'm seeing the good in it. And I'm still constantly being attacked. I've got to stand up for myself. But it's very, very difficult. And it goes to, what you say, you're not part of the problem for not saying it because it's freaking difficult to do anything. And that covert part, which is a lot of what I'm dealing with right now, honestly, you get gaslighted so much. You speak to people and it's like, there's these phrases that our society, pragmatism, balance. You know what? There's no balance between right and wrong, right? If you... This thing, I've heard it about the BBC, I've heard about so many different things. We've got impartiality, balance. As an adult, through experience, the thing that makes your experience worthwhile is you decide what's right and wrong. And there's a lot of these words, you don't want to be a protester, you want to be a leader and all of this. And what it does is it puts you into a box. And it makes you bring lesser of you forward. And I think that's for me, it's a constant battle. It's a constant frustration because actually, I know I'm not stupid. Every time I speak, there's a lot of people that won't want to work with me, for example. there's a lot of people that, because I'm easier to portray as the problem, and also I'm not as high profile as some of the people in cricket who have been brought back like nothing ever happened, or there's attempts to rewrite history. Ultimately, I can never compete with them when it comes to resource, when it comes to status quo or their friends. The only thing I have is my voice, but I wouldn't expect or want everyone to do it this way. But sat here as an individual, and I always said, I'm a human being as well. There'll come a time where I'll forget the cause, and because I won't be able to deal with it, and I'm there now. I'll be honest with you. The cause, I fought for the cause. People that have benefited off the back of what I've done have then gone onto the system and oppressed me even more, attacked me even more. So every time I do something for the cause, the people who benefit off it then actually, sit with the system and make me out to be this. I've got to this point where I'm like, you know what? There's no one more dangerous than someone that's got nothing to lose. And one of my biggest things that people always say to me, oh, how do you do it? How do you do it? I've carried my son from the hospital to the graveyard. That takes some courage. There is not a single pain anyone could remotely bring me close to that. And that's my fight. That's my strength, and that's my courage. And now, now through this process, since I guess sharing my experience, I've lost my son and my dad. So there is not any level of pain that can bring me close to that. And clearly, those at Yorkshire never got to know me. And clearly, those at the ECB now and cricket don't have an ounce of the fight that I've got. And ultimately, it's very easy when you're telling the truth. I can sit here, I can sit on podcasts left, right, center. There's a reason why none of them guys ever sit anywhere and speak about this, because their reality will come out. So, and it feels a very lonely place. And I've lost friendships. I've lost friendships of 20 odd years. I've lost a lot of relationships. And I continue to, probably on a weekly basis, because people want to control me. People want me to do it as they would like to do it. And I live it. And when I spoke out, I didn't know what a whistleblower was. Never heard of the word, really. God, I know what the word is and what it means, and the actual experiences of it. But like I said, the one thing I guess that still drives me is ultimately, if I look the other way on this now, there's more of a chance that it'll happen to my kids. I think they're going to go through it. And I think this is a conversation on every dinner table right now. The reality is, as much as we want to protect our kids, and I get this a lot from parents, how do you prepare your kids for this? Because up until you experience this, the world is a really, really easy place. The minute you accept this and realize it, the way every part of your life goes is very challenging, and and it's something I battle with all the time. But like I said, I don't have the privilege. We don't have the privilege to just ignore it. And that's what my answer to anyone saying just ignore it is, we don't have that privilege. We get reminded every day, no matter what we're doing. It's the covert stuff. It bites you. It really bites you. And it's doing it to me right now.
Privilege is the word I'd use, but also the word responsibility, I suppose, because you and I are both in the public eye. You've been in cricket, I've been in politics, and something I talk about quite often is the reality that I'm going to face Islamophobia, I'm going to face racism, but see if I take that, inshallah, it'll be that wee bit easier for the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that. And not everyone can do that. It's just because we are in the public eye. And then I suppose we've got that responsibility to talk about it publicly. I think the reality is that once this podcast comes out, there'll be grief that both you and I do get, but it's not going to be anything that we've not experienced before, right? And we've got that voice and got that platform to talk about our lived experiences, and they're going to be somewhat different to other people, but actually I think so many people resonate with it.
Yeah, they do. And and I've talked about a lot the sort of challenges and the negative part. And I guess what keeps me going, the amount of messages. and contact I have from, normal people. Um, and honestly, across industries, across our workplaces, across cricket, parents. Um, the one thing that don't get spoken about enough, girls.
Yeah.
So I've had a couple of parents get in touch about their girls because women's sport, in particular, is used to show how great sport is and how diverse sport is. But actually, women's sport has a massive racism problem, a
Okay.
huge one.
I didn't know that.
Well, this is the thing, because it's always suppressed, and you've got. From a representation point of view, you can see it for yourself. But I've had enough calls from parents that there's a huge issue. And it is that there is a responsibility. You do feel that responsibility, and also you're not going to expect what a lot of people that do. I guess what I've done is they get to a point and they're like, I've done my bit, and I get a lot of that. Oh, you've done your bit, you've done your bit, but then for someone else to start, they're gonna have to start from there again. What I'm not prepared to do, which a lot of people I've seen do in this space, is sell their values for an opportunity, for recognition. And I've been offered all of that stuff. I was offered a dream job, my dream job, in return for going quiet. And I was told by, someone very, very senior in the English game that I've got no chance. I won't win. He's got a friend that's a PR guy, get you this ambassadorship, this, that, the other. And I went, thanks, but no thanks. That's not why I spoke out. It's something I'd love to do in the future, but not at the expense of my values. And I'm not sharing this because, look at me, I'm thinking, because I've seen so many people, because that's how the system then goes, right. That's that problem gone.
They're no longer a threat.
No longer a threat. And now we start from square one. Listen, I can work with people, many people have their opinions because of what they've seen, etc. But what I'm not prepared to do is be your brown person for you to oppress someone else. That, to me, is the thing I hold on to. I've got to be very, very comfortable and sure that you are prepared to listen to reality. And unfortunately, cricket's not. The ECB is not. Their actions have proved it. The cricket media, as a whole, they're not. And, like I said, we are 5 years on, and I can share on this. I've been told recently that they're getting over hundreds of discrimination complaints constantly. And there's a lot of people that want to cover it up because, the way administrators, the way people, they think with their PR hats on. And they want to show this. ECB keeps saying we want to be the most inclusive sport. We are the most inclusive sport, XYZ. Words are cheap, seriously. And, like I said, a lot changes, but a lot doesn't. And if I was being honest, and again, I've been advised not to say this because it makes it look like what I did hasn't made a difference. What happened with my stuff, has it made a difference? In some cases, yes. Has it helped some people? Yes. It's made some, there was players, coaches, etc., who wouldn't even have their phone answered, who are now getting opportunities. That's the easiest part. But on the other side, the constant calls I'm getting about people, experiencing it and not getting anywhere shows that not a lot has changed. The ECB have done what institutions always do. We've got a brown person, we've got a black person, we've got this initiative, that initiative, a few crumbs here, a few crumbs there, a few faces that'll take a little bit of money to, project that. And then actually what it has done, and this was the reason I was attacked the way I was, this was the reason I'm still attacked the way I am, is actually not to stop me, because they know I'm not going to stop. It's to put fear into everyone else, that no one else dare come forward, because this is what we'll do to you. And that, I'll be honest with you, it hurts me that how alone I've been left to fend for myself in this at the minute. Like I said, some of my staunchest supporters have left me, and it's when you're the sort of front of it, it's easy to go, do this, do that. For a lot of people to say, do this, do that. I have to face the brunt of it. And the first point of, obviously, for me, the hardest thing to watch was people who supported me their lives being turned upside down. I found that very, very difficult. But I didn't think, that it would stray them. And, if I'm being honest, it has.
And Azeem, when you were speaking out about the challenges that you faced, your experiences, the racism, the Islamophobia, was that what other people of colour were also experiencing? Because sometimes it feels like it's just you that's spoken out, and other ethnic minority cricketers, did they just not experience what you went through, or is it just you that's speaking out?
Well, I think this is another, so I've seen the British society in its true colours through the media, through, through the institutions, through these investigations. And actually, the cycle that it went through from me speaking out, first they went after me. They didn't want to listen to me. Then they were left with no position but to accept what I'd gone through. Then they tried to cover it up. And when I'd been vindicated and they couldn't fight against that, then they blurred it. They blurred it so much that people are left confused. There's so many people. I met someone on this trip to the UK just now. He's like, I've had these questions for 6 years. And it was in a family environment, and his wife was just like so bored, but he just kept asking me questions for hours and hours, right? And I was like, go for it, because a lot of people have these questions because the lines have been blurred by the media, cricket media, and media at large. So people get to this point of, oh, I'm not really sure. The reality is I was vindicated in several investigations. So, in terms of other people, actually a lot of people did speak. The ICEC Commission had over 4,000 people speak at it. And that concluded, which was only a year and a half ago, I don't think it was that long ago. That report concluded that, over 87% of Pakistani and Bangladeshi people are discriminated against while being involved in cricket. Over 82% of Indian people while being involved in cricket, over 75% of black people while being involved in cricket, and over 50% of everyone, that includes from a gender point of view as well, are discriminated while being involved in cricket. So that's not just me. And then, there was a whistleblowing hotline at Yorkshire that was set up, which when Lord Patel came in, you thought they were moving in the right direction. That had over 200 people that spoke to it. Colin Graves came back, they ripped it up, threw it away. There was a dressing room review that was announced by the ECB. The report came, it was that bad, in a cupboard, hidden away. No one talks about it. So this notion that I'm the only one is actually another way of the press and the media trying to get people to believe that it was just one person. It's not everyone's experience. Even in my own thing, there was many of my teammates who backed me up. Rana Naveedul Hassan, Tino Best. These are international cricketers that backed me up. Adil Rashid at one. There was several. There was coaches. There was a coach who gave, a testimony in my stuff that he was in a room where he was specifically told one or two of them packies are all right, no more than that. That is a Yorkshire coach being told that. Now that's me. Let me jump to actually a clear example, because people get bored, right? People don't have the capacity to think for themselves, so they get bored. So whatever they get fed by largely right-wing racist media in the UK. One of the players was sanctioned and charged, Richard Pyra, sanctioned and charged for calling Asian women fit packies.
Sorry, what?
FPs, fit packies, right? That is what this person was sanctioned and charged, including to my own sister. Colin Graves comes back in, and this bloke's been brought in as a Yorkshire women's coach. Now, you tell me, how is this the most inclusive sport? And you didn't know that, right?
What Pakistani girls going to be involved in that?
Well, so a parent straight away took their daughter out.
Of course they would.
But the fact that you didn't know, the fact that no one knows, is exactly what the media does. Because what they've done is they've put everyone into this space, and they've taken this story to a place where everyone's like, oh, that again. Oh, it's Azeem again. I'm not naive to, and to be honest, for a large part of the last 2 years, I've not said anything. Mainly because, I've been in hospital, and I've had other priorities, rebuilding a life and stuff. But also, I wanted to give them a chance. I wanted to see the good in people. But actually, I've seen anything but, and I've seen it in a covert manner. And then when something like that happens, and no one, like literally no journalist, no one says a thing, well, I'm sorry. Like I said, action speaks louder than words. But he's not the only one, for what it's worth, right? He's not the only one. You know, they've continued to frame these perpetrators as victims.
And that's how they
And
were.
that's the privilege. That's the privilege white people hold. You know, the privilege of being able to shut it out is what they hold. You know, and I just think sometimes I sit there and go, oh my God, just imagine if before the hearing I said, I'm not turning up. I don't believe in this investigation. I'm not turning up. From day one, a lot of people said to me, close people, don't bother with it. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. They're going to use your stuff to turn it against you. I was like, you know what? You're probably right. But what I don't want to give them is Azeem didn't turn up. Azeem didn't turn up. I turned up to everything while knowing full well how corrupted to the core every step of the way has been. I turned up to everything because I knew I was telling the truth. Just before the CDC, a lot of them pulled out. They pulled out, and I mean, the privilege just makes me go, oh my God. So they pulled out, and everyone's framing at them as the victims. Imagine if I had pulled out and gone, you know what, I don't trust this system. I'd have been absolutely slated. And I was sent this last week because we've had to get lawyers involved again. And, what that does, that concentrated effort to, make me out to be the problem, it brings comments that leave scars. And, I had a comment sent to me last week where someone with their name, not botted or anything, with their name, posted saying, I wish I can't remember the exact words, something on the lines of, I wish it, did commit suicide. So when people say to me, oh, just leave it, listen, how the hell do I leave that?
They're not leaving you.
I am being, and I've been asked this by people of color. 9 times out of 10, I do ignore it. But you keep poking someone, and then they do something back to you. I'm the problem, they're the victim. And it's typical of the system. Like I said, it's been a difficult 18 months. I feel probably, I wouldn't even say back to square one. I feel like a little bit further than back to square one. But what I do have is 5 years of experience of fighting these people. And I would be the first one. I would love to have sat here, and I've said this several times, and go, you know what, cricket's changed. But what I'm not going to be is what a lot of people of color have done. And it's going to happen. They'll see it through their kids' lenses or their family's lenses. Soon, them pounds in their bank account ain't going to matter. Because trust me, I saw the pain in my father's eyes when he saw me in the pain that he saw me in. And, I remember my dad saying to me, when I first spoke out, he goes, मैंने अपने बच्चे को खून के आंसू रोते हुए देखा है. Don't step back. Don't go looking for it, but don't step back. And, obviously, dad's no more. And them words stay with me. I challenge them to keep going for me. I challenge each and every one of them to line up, organize the way they've organized. One person will be way, way stronger than any of them put together. And that's where I feel like I've got to, which is actually way, way further back than, when I first spoke out. But I'm 34 and I wish I had a little bit of naivety. I've just seen far too much at the age of 34. And I do, I feel a sense of responsibility, but also I'm not going to try and pretend that on a human level at this stage that I'm not, beyond angry at where I find myself through speaking out. So yeah, and they're the challenges, and they're constant challenges. Mentally you're constantly battling with it, and I've been very open about on this podcast. And if I just to break it back on them, my first interview, I sat on international television and talked about how the racism I'd experienced before going into any detail had left me close to taking my own life. And from that day onwards, there's been no stone left unturned from cricket people, from parts of the cricket media. Yes, there might be one or two that are all right, but at large, the establishment, and because of how big the select committee became, The reality is there's some really powerful people in government, in in the corridors of power that got really involved to, as I keep saying, get my blood, teach me a lesson. And that's been really difficult to deal with. And just sit there driving, especially when I'm driving. That's when I have my thoughts to myself, and I'm just like, they've left no stone left unturned. And the happiest day for them would be if I was to take my own life. And that at times keeps me going, but at times when I'm really low, it feels like that is going to be my end. And I very, very lucky that I'm a Muslim. I'm very lucky that I have my faith, because that's what keeps me going. Because otherwise, at times, there's been some very, very dark moments, and it's the way it's been concentrated to get me there that hurts. That really hurts.
And how do you navigate through that, Azeem? Because we come from a culture that doesn't really talk about mental health. I feel like it's maybe got a wee bit better over the years, but especially for men, you're the eldest child, you're in a Pakistani household, you're Muslim, and I feel like not our faith, but definitely our culture is conducive to an environment where we tell men to be strong, to man up, don't cry, don't be weak. How do you navigate through all that?
You know what? It's really difficult. I'll come on to our culture and the men part in a minute, but actually, we have all these hashtags. It's okay to speak up. We have well-being teams, safeguarding teams. I do a lot of work in this space now. There is so much of BS that is spoken about how people will listen. When I spoke out first, or when I remember when I first started sharing how I was feeling, it was actually, I was reposting suicidal stuff because I wanted someone to see and that I'm asking for help. I wanted someone to pick up and go, "Are you all right?" Because I didn't know how to share it. I didn't know how to share it. But actually, I remember an agent ringing me up and saying, "Listen, you need to delete them because coaches think that you've gone mental." And actually, they are, behind what they have to say, that's what people think when you speak about how you're feeling. That's not for everyone. I'm an ambassador of a mental health charity around research and stuff. There's some really, really good people. It's not, but at large, it's still a very, very taboo, very difficult subject to talk about. And also, when you do talk about it, and you can tell straight away when you speak to someone, especially men in a group of men, you can tell straight away when they switch off. And I found it really difficult. At times, I've sort of shared it through things I've posted. At times, I've just, shared it to random people. And at times, I've really gone, what's the point? And that's coming from someone, that's openly shared it. I've had therapy. I've taken antidepressants. I've gone through, many different sort of layers of it. And then when you add on losing a child, and the grief and the challenges that, and then losing my career, when you add all of it together, it feels like sometimes I look back and go, how the hell have I got any sanity? But, my faith, Allah, these are the things that I sort of tap into. You know what? Sense of responsibility. I am the eldest son and I have a lot of responsibilities. So that, I've got, got a cousin that's committed suicide and I've seen the effects of that. So I guess that sort of holds me back. But for me, one of the biggest things that's helped me sort of process it or get through them really dark moments is probably physical training, running. Running's been my therapy. A lot of people who follow me will have seen that I've been running in stupid degrees here in Dubai, but actually, honestly, that's been my therapy. But at the same time, in them dark moments, sometimes I've been like, I don't have the courage to end my life. I hope running does it for me in this heat. So it's been, you never sort of, you've never smashed it or you've never conquered it. It's a constant journey. It's a constant battle. And it's difficult. It's really difficult. And if you can find people that you can share it with, it does get better. It does. And that's in the moments of real darkness. That's what I try and hold on to. But also, I'm a big believer in listening to your mind, listening to how you're feeling, listening to your body, because there's times, you know, listen, I'm not expert. I'm just talking about my experience and how I've sort of dealt with it. And a lot of people would say, don't put yourself away, don't lock yourself away, keep engaging, etc., etc. At times, I've locked myself away because actually, that's been the only way I've been able to function. At times I haven't got out of bed, and doing all of that while having young kids, elderly parents, new country, it's been a lot. And that's why this has been even harder, because when people you spend best part of a decade with, people you shared lives with, crickets, used to share a lot of life, people who my mum cooked food for, people who stayed at my house, to, to see the way they have all reacted to it or behaved towards me in that moment. There's a lot of scars, and I think they'll stay. I think anyone who's got this far in the podcast will realize I wear my heart on my sleeve. I am what I am. No one's perfect. And but the one thing is, I hope through the sharing, and I know it has, and I had a lot of messages, especially from fathers who have lost kids, because again, even in that conversation, I remember the doctor saying, "Oh, it's not your child. I need to speak to your wife." And as a dad, you're expected to just that it doesn't affect you. And also, people off the back of it was like, "Oh, make sure you don't, make sure that you don't neglect yourself." But in that moment, I had a wife to look after. How could I not neglect myself? And I think, yeah, I think that trauma is still sort of there, but I think it was just made even bigger because of my workplace. And this is the point about, there's so many of these places, or empathy and these words that are really, really nice. But when it goes into action, I mean, maybe I've just been unlucky, but speaking to a lot of people, you find out that actually they are just words.
Yeah, but it's a lot to deal with and a lot of trauma as
What do you
well.
mean? Listening to me will be draining for you.
No, but I mean,
No, but that's my point. It's so much that just whenever I share it, I feel like, Rick, this must be so draining. Like for me, like the rest of my week now after doing this, and this is probably one of the reasons I've not done many of this recently, is that my rest of the week I'll be dead. I'll be nowhere, because every time you share it, you really relive it, and you remember stuff when you're having conversations. You remember stuff you'd forgotten, and then when it gets put out, when you get put out, you're like, it's like that, because you know how it's going to be. Yeah, well, you're not stupid. You know how it's going to, when you're having, a lot of people talk about unfiltered, a lot of people talk about unapologetic, etc. But it's not. This is. It really is, because you know full well, you know, I mean, like you say, you remember stuff. This next bit, like, I could not believe. So there was 2 points of the select committee that I cried. And you'll have seen it today. Even it's like, it's either when I'm talking about my son, now obviously, or it's I'm talking about my career and my dream. And people from our own community, said, basically tried to portray a message to me. I was putting on my crying, and that I just makes me go, oh my god, the judgment of actually sharing all this is something that, bear in mind, I spoke out, and my interview was to get it off my shoulders, to release some of the trauma I'd been carrying quietly. And arguably, I've built more trauma. Arguably, I live and carry more with me than I had, but I wouldn't change it for the world, because you know what? I don't think I'd be here if I was still carrying it.
and there's just so much that you carry, Azeem. There really is, and I think I think the reality is that most people will have seen things online or maybe just read newspaper articles and they don't actually know you as a person.
No one
And
knows. No one knows
yeah,
half of it. This is not half of it. My first interview to the lawyers was 8 hours. No one knows even half of the behind the scenes. No one knows the type of, organization that Yorkshire, some of our leaders, some MPs, the level that people went through to stop me being heard.
Yeah.
The level, and they continue to go through right now. Actually, you know what? Because I am in a little bit of a better place in the last few weeks. Actually, I thought, you know what a compliment. I've literally got the whole of the ECB, the whole of the game, the cricket media, supported by politicians that want to suppress my voice, and the resources that they're putting into that. You know what? That's a compliment in itself. But ultimately, they, every time they try to use their power, Allah had my back. They tried to create evidence. Imagine if I tried to create evidence and got caught out. The director of cricket tried to create evidence and got caught out. And yet, to this day, I'm the problem. These guys are the victim. That's not easy.
And just with everything you've experienced, it's really difficult to then be vulnerable, because both personally and professionally, because personally you're having to deal with, as you say, you're the eldest son, you've got your family to look after, and then on a professional level you're still trying to continue with these battles. And I've got to know you over the years, Azeem, and you're someone that, I mean, I feel like every time we catch up, you and I both, we put the world to right, and at the end, nothing changes, because there's no meaningful change. But yeah, I mean, to think about what you've been through now, but even all those years ago, and I mean, you speak quite openly about your son passing away, but also at the same time having to deal with these professional issues. I mean, I just don't know how you do it.
Don't get me wrong. I'm very scared. I'm scared of. I'm 34, because I know the level of organization and the level of resource that's been put in to get my blood, teach me a lesson. Very scared. Professionally, it's very difficult. Every room I walk into, I know there is perceptions and etc. etc. But also in the last sort of 18 months, how actively the ECB, supported by the Professional Cricket Association, supported by people at Yorkshire, supported by the cricket media, how actively they've gone out their way to sabotage professional opportunities. Because in their eyes, that's how they're going to get back at me. They've tried everything else. That's how they're going to get back at me. But you know what? Rizq is written. No one's going to give me more. No one's going to give me less. Does it put fear into me? Absolutely. But I work hard. I'll stand up for myself. I'll work hard. And ultimately, what's written for me, they won't be able to take away from me. But in the moments, it's very difficult, because you're constantly like, oh, what shall I speak about? Oh, is this the right place? Oh, another person. Because actually, what you end up doing is you end up trying to justify, and you end up trying to convince people that, what you've read there is not actually what happened. And that's tiring. That's very tiring in a way. Even through the book, if anyone that reads the book, and I encourage you to do it if you're listening, it's the tone that I've taken in that is very, very calm. It's, I've not gone at people.
No, it's a very reasoned book.
I could have put so much in there, because I really wanted to make sure that, there was opportunity and a place where things could be better. But there's part of me right now in the last few months, especially because of how they've behaved around my dad's loss, part of me regrets being so nice. You talk about unapologetic. I've been told I can be very reasonable, but I can be very unreasonable. And I think I regret at times in the last few years being too reasonable to these people. I should have sued the living daylights out of some of these guys. There's some of the stuff that's been written about me online. That's something my kids are going to have to read when they grow up, and I should have sued them, and even the way they've continued behind the scenes. Listen, if there's anything I'm saying that wasn't true, don't you think that these people would have sued me?
Yeah, exactly.
To this day, and there's this notion, I had parliamentary privilege, and that's why I said what I've done. Probably over 100 interviews, directly calling out people, saying names of who's done what. Say to this day, these people are a bunch of racists, and I have no problem now at this stage, unapologetically saying that actually, you know what, at times I've been too nice to these people. And that's going to change. That really is going to change. And, you know, where I'll be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, only Allah knows.
And just to explain for our listeners, parliamentary privilege extends in the UK Parliament. So as a former member of Parliament, I could stand up in the chamber and say essentially what I wanted within reason, and I would have been protected. I could have been sued.
Apart from, as we saw recently, call someone racist.
Yeah,
racist
and I
comments.
couldn't call Boris Johnson a liar during COVID, breaking the rules and stuff like that. However, more generally, you are protected as a member of Parliament, but also that extends to members of the public who give evidence at House of Commons select committees. And select committees, because we've spoken about this quite a lot, Department of Culture, Media and Sport, there's a select committee that mirrors that department, and you had cross-party members from different political parties who then were questioning you.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Again, I didn't know any of this. When I was walking into that room, I didn't know any of it. I didn't know what parliamentary privilege, etc., etc. You know, I was, and I think that's what those that knew, what scared them is that, you know, they couldn't, because they saw me as someone that would only say this stuff in parliamentary privilege and stuff, and I wouldn't be able to repeat it outside. I've repeated it many times outside, you know, because, you know, ultimately your biggest protection is the truth. But yeah, that parliamentary privilege was what put a lot of people in fear as to what I will share. And then because of that, some of them outed themselves and some of them, you know, tried to sort of backtrack and stuff. So that parliamentary privilege obviously is very strong, but this accusation at me that I would only say under parliamentary privilege is just, it just doesn't stack up. But the narrative is shaped by a largely racist media. And, you know, most people don't read past 2 lines anyway. And these headlines are created.
Very clickbaity.
Very clickbaity created. And yeah, I wish but again, it's the resource part, you know, going up against these people. The one thing I was very, very lucky, which is very unique. I got amazing legal and PR support pro bono, you know, it was above and beyond, and actually that's what allowed me to be able to stand up. Those guys went around, rang everyone to try and find out, because they thought I was being funded by someone, and I wasn't. I just had good people supporting me. But, you know, I knew that that's not going to be forever. And one of the reasons why I probably didn't sue these guys for when they were writing all this stuff is because, you know, it's a process that in the end protects those with money and power, right? There was no way I could you know, keep up with these guys when it came to resource. And in a way, that was another reason why I sort of went, you know what, I need to step aside and, you know, hopefully things will change. Because, I mean, again, these things get forgotten. I've probably had 5, 6 apologies, you know, vindication in several different, you know, hearings, you know, at the employment tribunal. And yet the clickbait from right-wing press is somehow it's my word against theirs. I mean, there was a period, I mean, this is the laughable part of it. There was a period in the whole thing where the media tried to portray me as the stronger party in this conflict, if you want to call it. They tried to portray me against the ECB, Yorkshire, you know, big name stars, cricket media, Telegraph, Mail, you name it, as I was somehow the strong party in this. And I was just like, this is just ridiculous. But people believe it.
You said that you were surrounded by good people that were able to give you their services pro bono. But how important has that been to you over the years, just surrounding yourself with good people?
Yeah, and you know, it's probably naturally because of the conversation and naturally because there's still so much going on that gets the last bit of most conversations. And actually, I've met some amazing people. I've met some real people. I've had incredible support, you know, and I've met people that are genuine. I've met a lot of trash, and I'll be honest, and I'm not going to beat around the bush, but I've met some amazing people who have sort of kept me going. And that's something I'm incredibly thankful for. And, you know, for every 100 people that they've had in their corner, helping them, because ultimately, you know, they're all the same. The reality, they're trying to protect each other, trying to close ranks, because when that status quo gets pushed, they're suddenly going to have to be as good. They can't just have their privilege that gets them into roles or position or opportunities. Yeah, so in a way, I guess those 400 people that they've had, probably had one, but that one's been absolutely amazing. Again, I probably don't say this enough, but it feels a little bit cringe at times. I feel a bit, but actually, genuinely, I am so thankful for, for those people. I'm very, very thankful for, the random people that I've never met, that I've never come across, who get in touch. And I'm thankful for people that actually get in touch who are going through hard times with a bit of hope, because that was me at one point, and I've made it my sort of thing to make sure I speak to them and try and see if I can help them, which is not easy, which is very difficult. But I was that person once. I rang a few black and brown people, and I know that them not helping me, how that made me feel. So I've met amazing people, and I'm very, very super thankful for that. But I guess the reason that that's sort of the last thing, ultimately, when I go to bed, the clock and me is me. The consequences of everything I have to deal with, and the decisions on a daily basis at the time, a little bit, more time now, the decisions that I take, ultimately, I've got to make them, and I've got to live with them. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like, the effect of this when I get a bit older will probably, my skin's going, as my wife keeps telling me. But yeah, I am super, super thankful for all the incredible people that I've met over the last few years who have had my back, publicly, as well as quietly.
Alhamdulillah. And I mean, you've spoken a lot about mental health, and you're involved in a charity now, aren't you?
Yeah, MQ is a mental health charity that focuses on research. So again, I'd like, if you can, have a look at them, because one of the challenges around mental health, and that's why I've been very picky about what I get involved with, because at time, there's, in terms of research, we have a tagline that if it's not research, it's guesswork. But sadly, within the research, people that look like me and you don't get involved in that. And I really want to encourage people to get involved in that research, because if we have research, then there'll be better answers, better solutions, hopefully. So it's something I'm very, very proud to be. I wish I could do more, if I'm being honest. But this hour and a half, anyone that reads it is going to get tired. Just imagine sort of living it. So, I hope there comes a time where I'm able to, put more time towards that and less fighting these racists. But I think that's going to take for them to stop, which they're not going to stop. So, look, I hope I can do my bit in that space. And the other one that I'm really, really passionate about is, parents that lose their children, especially dads. That's a very, very lonely place with not a lot of support, really, and you're expected to just get on with it. So these are things I'm really, really passionate about. And yeah, I hope in time, as I get older, I'm able to, spend less time fighting and more time supporting these causes that I really care about.
Inshallah. Inshallah. And when you look to the future, Azeem, what hopes do you have? And I know that's, oh my goodness, actually, I'm cringing at myself for asking that question, because it's such a cringeworthy but also loaded question, but it's also really important.
You,
So I feel like people will have listened to your story. Hopefully they'll read your book, but then I suppose that's the one thing that we've
well,
only
it's
got going is hope.
at the end, I've left them with a hope in the book. I think there's a few call to actions within the book.
What are your call to actions?
I think the one big thing for me is actually, we have got to be very, very open and careful about who we have representing us in them rooms. It's
100%.
really important, because if my voice is not being represented in that room, then we've got to get away from this cultural part of not questioning elders. We've got to ask questions. If someone's representing me, I want to ask questions, and don't think by asking questions you're the problem. Because the way society makes you feel that you can't ask questions is by making you feel like you're the problem by asking. I can leave this thing that I've been sort of saying the last few weeks. As a child, you're asked to be curious. The same sort of question as you get older, or the same questioning of situations turns into conspiracy theory. The reason for that is to try and suppress you and not let you ask questions. So, there's stuff like that. But hope is something we can't let go of. It really, and this sound cringe, actually, and, at times the last few months and stuff, I haven't felt any hope. But last week, and again, obviously this is going to be a time thing when it goes out, I woke up, I was in the UK, and ultimately, I don't know how Zohran Mamdani is going to get on in New York. I don't live in New York, etc., etc. But actually, what I did see, or what it gave me a spring in my step that day, and it has done every day since. His song, just all of it, I feel like there's hope. And actually, he showed through the way he articulated himself, the way he, connected with people. And I guess as we're getting close to the end of this podcast, there's a word that gets branded around a lot, authenticity. But what does it actually look like? It gets used in corporate language, and authenticity is, you go on LinkedIn, there's, AI post stuff. I mean, the irony is people, writing posts with AI and talking about authenticity. And it's like, please, that was authenticity in action. That was someone he wasn't putting that on. And actually, people are sick and tired of seeing people on TV or people that are, not being authentic. And I think we've got to get that connection back between each other, that connection back of being able to go, no, actually, I don't need to pander, there's clear lines of accountability, these legitimate concerns, etc. So these are ways to push you in a direction. And actually, sometimes I look at politicians or people and I'm like, you don't believe that. There's no way you believe that. And I guess going back to the question, when someone like that becomes the mayor of New York, against the system who put millions in to destroy him, all sorts, from eating with hands to the Islamophobia was
Horrific.
Above the scale. Like, it was ridiculous, right? But in the end, the people made him win, and win by a margin. I hope he goes undelivered, but that's hope. But that shows, for me, again, there is hope there, but it's only going to happen with authenticity. People are sick and tired of seeing parroted, agenda-driven stuff on their TV. So I think it's just that, holding on to that hope. And we can't, on my own, I'm not going to change the world. Nelson Mandela didn't get rid of racism, right? But he did what he could do. And actually, you get this sort of thing, oh yeah, but that's a societal problem. You'll ask cricketers or sports people, like, oh, that's a societal problem. But I've got to play my part in society. And, thinking that I can't do something, then I've got no chance. I've got to believe. I've got to believe, because that's what drives me out of bed. Everything seems impossible till it's done. So I think these are the things that, I sort of hold on to. And ultimately, I'm a parent now, and I know I don't want my kids to go through that. So if I have to be in the firing line of that, then you know what? That's absolutely fine.
I think Zohran Mamdani's win has just given us all hope. There's a word, I don't know, I think it's a Scottish word. Do you know the word scunnered?
No.
All right, okay.
Absolutely not.
There's my Scottish accent coming through. So scunnered is a good old Scottish word. Basically, how do I say what scunnered means? It's scunnered, it's like, not that you've given up hope, but you just can't be bothered. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
like,
Well, that's what the system makes you feel, right?
yeah. And even I, Azeem, as like a former MP, have just felt so scunnered over the last year and a half. You had that change in government. I think we all thought, no, actually, I knew that this wasn't going to happen, but I think people thought there was going to be change. Remember, that was the tagline of Labour.
Listen, I remember posting, the grown-ups are in the room. I feel embarrassed of that tweet now. I literally feel embarrassed of that tweet. So I don't think you're the only one. I think a lot of us are disillusioned. A lot of us are like, where is the hope? Yeah. Where is the turn? A lot of us are looking to someone to come on, lead us, take us in a direction. And actually, bit of empathy, bit of humanity, bit of actually just being good people, and all of that is, sadly, you've got the monetization of hate on social media platforms. You've got the richest man on the planet who's literally impact. We've seen a report this week that the algorithms is Elon Musk is helping the far right propaganda being pushed forward, and him himself posting some of the incendiary stuff he's posting. What that does is it empowers everyone else.
Yeah.
That's what it does. So it's been
It's been difficult, man.
And also,
It's been really difficult.
let's be right. The genocide in Gaza has, I think it's woken up and taken all the, what's the best way? I think it's taken all the sort of naivety of a lot of people over, and it's, you've seen in truest form what racism, where it ends up to, where it ends. And actually we've watched, very difficultly, we've watched human beings being slaughtered. We've watched children being slaughtered every day on our TV screens, on our phones, and not being able to do anything about it. And I think that in itself has left us all with like, God, what is my point in this world? Because if I can't help them kids, what am I here to do? And actually while watching that, you've had a lot of people not only defending it, justifying it and cheering it on. That's been an eye-opener. And I guess the biggest eye-opener has been, while we've been watching what we've been watching, there's been representatives of Israeli government, there's been representatives in our media, commentators, etc., who have sat there and told us what we're watching is not what's happening. And it's like, we've just been gaslighted. And I think that in the last 2 years, Gaza and that genocide has shifted, the way everyone sees the media and the world. And I don't know what happens moving forward.
Yeah.
The Iraq war, and that from there, the way we've seen Tony Blair sort of, go on and basically have a great life. And you see it now and you're like, right, this can't happen again. And I think it goes, whatever conversation we have, there's a lot of things that are very comfortable to do, but what's not comfortable is standing up when you've got the power saying, no, you're standing up and asking for accountability. That's one thing we have to ask for, because, at some point, our kids are going to ask us, what did you do?
What did you do? And I think that's the one thing that keeps me going. I remember shortly after the 7th of October, now, when I was elected, I'd already spoken about Palestine a number of times. In fact, when I was elected, my very first question in the chamber after making my maiden speech was on arms sales getting sold to Israel. So it's something that I and so many other people have spoken about quite regularly. But after 7th of October, I was asked by people around me, are you going to speak out? And I mean, like you've spoken, your faith is really important to you. Faith is really important to me. Now, I might not be identifiably Muslim if I don't wear a hijab, but my faith grounds me and it leads me to lead my life in the decisions that I make. And after the 7th of October, I was like, well, I have to speak out because I've got that position. Allah gave me that position. Obviously, the people of air drain shots elected me, but we believe in risk as Muslims.
Absolutely.
We believe that our lives are written, and that position I was in, I was there at that time. And ultimately, I'm going to die one day on the day of judgment. Allah's going to ask me, what did you do when children were being slaughtered in Gaza, when a genocide was going on, when children in Gaza were looking at the air, not knowing if bombs or aid were falling on them? And I mean, going back to what you said initially, Zoran Mamdani's win has given so much of us that hope, because you had a politician who was authentically, you say the word authentic, but who genuinely was authentically himself, who had every part of the establishment go against him. And I think for so many of us, whether you're in cricket like you, whether you're in politics like me, or whether you're just an average punter on the street, every single one of us have been given that little bit of hope.
Yeah, I agree. And, I do sense a little bit of a generational shift as well. Like, I had many conversations with people, who are a lot older than me, in the last sort of 18 months around the election and stuff like that. And a lot of people have these, they're so trained and, they're sort of in a way where they're like, oh, but the protest vote, oh, he's not a leader. 6-7 weeks ago, someone like Zohra Mamdani would have been seen as a protest vote, not a leader. And they've made this thing of what a leader looks like, and the reality is the public have now gone, no, that's not what the leader looks like. This is what the leader looks like. And I think there's a generational shift. A lot of people thought, oh yeah, and I had these conversations with people when Labour came into power, because I've never been a Keir Starmer fan. I don't. Anyone that tells me what I want to hear and tells someone else what they want to hear, anyone that I can't understand what they stand for, that's not a leader, in my opinion. And I always felt, even through my personal experience, I never, been a Labour voter all my life, never felt supported by Labour in my thing. But, when you can sit and talk about, what you can advocate for water, electricity to be cut off, which is a war crime, you knew at that point that, there was going to be a real shift. And that, I'm glad that shift has happened. And I guess moving forward, people more and more will connect with authenticity. And, there's a lot of good people. There really is. It's just the problem is large part of the media is right wing. And that's the hard part, because sadly, they're very good at dividing and ruling. It's the oldest colonial tactic.
Exactly. I feel like we've spoken about so much, Azeem, and we can continue to speak about so much.
We can't, because I've got to go.
But you have a football match to watch, which you warned me about at the start. So we'll start wrapping up. We normally have quite a light-hearted end, but this has been quite a heavy conversation, so I might just skip out some of the questions.
Okay.
But we do normally end our podcast with this or that section. So it's called That's My Cup of Tea. So don't think too much. Just come with whatever comes to your gut. The first question I normally ask is, what are you currently reading? But I feel like you just need to plug your book.
Well, you know what? This was the first ever book I read.
Oh, really?
And this is the only book I've read. And you know what? I only read it when I was doing the audiobook. I can read articles. I can read things. I was saying this to my wife the other day. I really struggled to get into a book. So yeah, this is the only book. So you need to get on Amazon, get on Waterstones, whatever. If you want a signed copy, you're more than welcome to get in touch with a podcast, and I'll do that for you as well.
Perfect. I'll get that organised. And that reminds me, my copy is back home, so I actually need mine signed.
Yeah.
So forget anyone else. I'll be there first.
Perfect.
I normally ask what's your coffee, but you already explained that you're a coffee person. So I'll ask, what's your go-to comfort food?
Oh, biscuits. God, my Lord.
Oh, that's such a Yorkshire thing to say, or such an English thing to say, is it not?
No, definitely not. I mean, I was back there just now, and like I said, I've been very strict with the hobnobs and chocolate digestive. I could finish off any day. In Pakistan, we have bakery biscuits, and we get these chocolate ones with like a little blob of chocolate in the middle. Biscuits every day. Although it's I'm not a massive eater, but my word, biscuits are for 9 months when I was away from all sugar. I couldn't have biscuits while my kids were having them. That was tough.
Right, okay, so I'm going to ask you now about a particular type of biscuit. It's not cake rusk, because I don't really I don't like cake rusk. They're like
Hobnobs.
overrated.
Hobnobs.
No, but you know what you do? You get them in the DC shops. I don't know if you recommend. I feel like, I don't know if the company's gone into administration. Someone can correct me if they've not. But it's a company called KCB. And it's like a red packet, and it's something called an egg biscuit. So it's not cake rusk.
I know what you mean.
Are basic. If
I know the egg ones.
Yeah.
No. There's just not enough there.
Oh no, Azeem.
I need chocolate.
See the full pack of egg biscuits.
I know exactly.
I could finish them. I demolish them so quickly.
I had a lot of drives when I was back there. The first thing I did is stop at petrol station, got a hobnob, and I was like, right, I'll have one now, one later. And literally, before I'd crossed 2 junctions, I'd finished the whole packet.
That's quite concerning.
Yeah, but hopefully I can now get that back next few weeks.
From a very young age, you've been very, very passionate about cricket. And I know that as you grew older and you worked with some of those people that you saw as heroes, it was really difficult because you saw them in their true light. But if you could have dinner with any cricketer, past or present, who would that be? From anywhere in the world.
Imran Khan.
I thought you were going to say
Imran
that.
Khan. To be honest, a a lot of when I was, my fight, I took a lot of inspiration from him. Jemima, his first wife, his ex-wife, she was one of the first public profile figure who came out and supported me publicly, and become a friend. So yeah, absolutely, any day of the week.
And what's a quote or something that grounds you in those difficult times?
You know what? The first thing that comes to my mind is when around the CDC. This is what I mean about people don't know what happened. Literally 2 days before I was supposed to travel for the week hearing, they tried to stop my own lawyers being in the room, and I was like, how does that work? While the other side had everyone, and I spoke to, and it goes on to mental health. Really, I straight away I messaged my therapist, and I've had a lot of different therapy, and not a lot of worked, and this one I was building some really good trust with. And I messaged her. I said, I need to speak to you. I feel like I'm going to spiral. And she messaged something along the lines of, is it urgent or can it wait till tomorrow? And I was like, listen, I think it's urgent. And she goes, I'll speak to you tomorrow. And I went, and that really, but that was brave from her. But it actually helped me because it made me go, hold on a minute. She believes that I'll be all right. I need to believe in myself. But then when I spoke to her the next day, and the one quote that we sort of took away from it is that the next few weeks, because they were writing all sorts, they had the whole system, the whole, everyone you could think of was sort of, getting together to how they were going to portray the narrative. And the quote that sort of left with is, the next few weeks are going to be imperfect. Enjoy the imperfections. And actually, that really helped me, and it made the whole week really, really easy for me. So yeah, life is imperfect. Enjoy the imperfections of life.
It's really lovely. That is really lovely. And Azeem, I know you don't like the words unapologetic and
Oh, I love the
destructive.
words because I think, but for me, a lot of people that speak it, it doesn't transcend into action. It's just something that they think it sounds good, because actually, when it turns into action, it's pretty uncomfortable.
Well, we try on the podcast to be unfiltered as much as we can, unapologetic as much as we can, and disruptive as much as we can. So for the kind of final sip, the one question I've got for you is, if a young kid came to you and said, Azeem, I'm really interested in cricket. I want to continue with my love of the game and turn this professionally. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, listen, I mean, obviously the age matters. I think the parents' involvement in it matters. I think I would share the challenges to the parents, but to the child, why, you want to protect them for as long as you can. And then slowly over a period of time, you can't drop all this on them. You want to try and get them ready. But I think that is happening a little bit. I had a parent that got in touch and said, their daughter went into a room and got called a P word, and she came and told the parents, and the parents dealt with it. So that, if you think back to as a 15-year-old, I was, I had red wine poured down my throat, held down, and red wine poured down my throat as a Muslim. And I never told my parents, I had all these, I never told my parents, because for me, it was like, well, I won't play cricket. So the fact that this girl did that shows to me that is changing. But, ultimately it's trying to get the parents to basically be understanding of what their child, the environment that they're going to be put into, and watching out for signs, really. I think for a kid, I wouldn't, I think over a period of time, depending on the age, you try and find ways to get them ready for it. But also, I think what you try and do is that build a support network, so when it does happen, they're able to handle it.
Thank you so much for joining us, Azeem.
Thanks for having me.
I normally end these podcasts with a thank you, but I don't think a thank you is enough for Azeem, for his honesty, for his courage, and for telling us what the cost is of telling the truth. I felt like that was a really vulnerable podcast, to be honest. Normally, I like to try and keep them lighthearted, yet informative. But this conversation, I mean, it wasn't just about cricket, was it? It's deeper than that. It's about every institution that rewards silence, every workplace that confuses loyalty with complicity, and every person who's ever been made to choose between belonging and integrity. I genuinely can't thank Azeem enough for his conversation. Whenever we meet, we always try and put the world to right, but I just felt like that conversation was just so raw and so emotional. I do want to hear from you as well, because when you think about courage, what does it mean to speak up in your own sector, in your own world? And how do we build cultures in sports and politics and everyday life where truth doesn't have to come with such a heavy price? And the win of Zoran Mamdani, I mean, I feel like I'm having this conversation with every single person. It's given me hope. What does it make you feel? How does it make you feel? Do you now feel that the world has just got that little bit easier because we've got that authentic representation at the very top? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Please share this episode with a friend who you think it will resonate with. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of DemocraTEA, where we spill the tea on people, power, and politics. See you next time.